The collective unconscious. We are all sharing the same dream. Last night, while you slept, a teenager in Sao Paulo, a retired fisherman in Osaka, and a software engineer in Berlin all had the same dream. Not similar. The same. Teeth crumbling in their mouths, falling from a height they cannot name, running from something they cannot see. They have never met. They share no language, no history, no trauma. And yet something inside each of them reached for the identical image at the identical hour. What if the most private experience you have, your dreams, was never actually private at all? Today, we are going to explore one of the most misunderstood ideas in all of psychology. It is called the collective unconscious, and it was proposed over a century ago by the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. Most people hear that phrase and assume it is a metaphor, a poetic way of saying we all share common experiences. It is not a metaphor. Jung meant it literally, and he did not arrive at the idea through philosophy or mythology. He arrived at it in a psychiatric hospital, staring at patient data that should not have been possible. This matters to you, not as an intellectual exercise, but as a way of understanding something you have probably already felt. Why a piece of music can shatter you for no reason. Why you meet a stranger and feel as though you have known them for centuries. Why certain symbols in dreams carry a weight that your waking mind never placed there. Over the next few minutes, we are going to walk through what the collective unconscious actually is, how it speaks, and why Jung believed that ignoring it is not just a personal failure, but a danger to civilization itself. And we will end with a question that, if you sit with it honestly, might change the way you understand your own mind. In 1906, a young Carl Jung was working at the Burgholzli Clinic in Zurich. One of his schizophrenic patients, a man with limited education and no access to classical texts, described a vision. He said he could see a tube hanging from the sun and that this tube controlled the wind. He told Jung to look at it to see how the wind moved when the tube swayed from side to side. Jung recorded it, filed it away, and then, years later, something happened that changed the direction of his entire career. A scholar named Albrecht Dieterich published a translation of a Greek magical papyrus known as the Mithraic Liturgy. In it, there was an almost identical image, a tube hanging from the sun, the origin of wind. The text had not been published in any form during the patient's lifetime. It existed in no language the man could have read. There was no path by which the image could have traveled from that ancient document to that hospital room. And yet, there it was, the same image, the same structure, separated by nearly 2,000 years. Now, most of us, when confronted with something that does not fit our model, simply look away. Jung did not look away. He began collecting cases like this, images, symbols, narrative structures that appeared in the dreams and psychotic episodes of people who could not possibly have encountered them through any normal channel of transmission. And he noticed that these same patterns appeared in mythology, not in one culture, in nearly all of them. The Great Flood, which appears in over 200 traditions worldwide, the dying and rising god, the world tree that connects the heavens to the underworld, the serpent guarding forbidden knowledge. Here is the question that most people never stop to ask. If these symbols arise independently in cultures separated by oceans and millennia with no evidence of contact or transmission, then where are they coming from? Jung's answer was that they come from a layer of the psyche that is not personal, not acquired through experience, not built from your memories or your childhood. Beneath the personal unconscious, beneath the basement of repressed memories that Freud mapped so carefully, there is something deeper, something that belongs to no individual but is inherited by every human being who has ever lived. He called it the collective unconscious. And this is the distinction that changes everything. The personal unconscious is your basement. It holds your forgotten memories, your repressed experiences, the things you have pushed out of awareness. But the collective unconscious is the geological bedrock beneath the entire city. Every building stands on it. No one put it there, and no one can remove it. This was not a theory looking for evidence. It was evidence that demanded a theory. So, if the collective unconscious exists, this ancient shared layer beneath your personal mind, how does it communicate? It does not send you a notification. It does not articulate itself in sentences. It speaks the oldest language there is: symbols. A symbol, in the Jungian sense, is not a sign. A stop sign means stop and nothing more. But a symbol is an image that carries more meaning than your conscious mind can fully unpack. It resonates, it hums, it feels, and this is Jung's word, numinous, charged with an energy that you did not put there. This is why your dreams sometimes feel more real than your waking life. Not because they are random firings of neurons, but because they are drawing on a reservoir of images that is older than your language, older than your culture, older than your species in its current form. And here is something you have probably already experienced without having the framework to understand it. You have cried during a movie scene that has nothing to do with your life. You have never lost a spouse to old age in the way Carl and Ellie's story depicts. You may have never experienced that kind of love at all. And yet something in that sequence reaches past your personal history and touches a structure that was already there. The archetype of union and loss. The pattern of love that does not survive time. You are not weeping for those animated characters. You are weeping because something in you recognizes that shape. Recognizes it the way your hand recognizes the shape of a stone it has never held, but was somehow made to fit. This is the collective unconscious at work. Not in a textbook, in your body, in the tightness of your throat, in a dark theater, and it does not stop at dreams and films. Think of the last time you met a stranger and felt something immediate and irrational. Not attraction exactly, something more primal, a deep, inexplicable trust, or a deep, inexplicable suspicion. You had no evidence for the feeling. You had barely exchanged a sentence. But something in your psyche had already classified this person, not based on who they are, but based on what archetype they activated in you. Now, this is where the most common misunderstanding needs to be corrected. When people hear the word archetype, they tend to think of characters, the hero, the mother, the trickster. But Jung was very precise about this. Archetypes are not characters. They are empty forms, structural patterns of perception, inherited in the same way your body inherits the structure of a lung or the shape of a hand. Jung compared them to dry riverbeds. The shape is there before the water arrives. Your personal experience is the water. The archetype is the channel it flows through. If you flatten archetypes into characters, you end up with pop psychology listicles. Which archetype are you? That is not what Jung was describing. He was describing the invisible architecture of human experience. The reason every civilization independently tells the story of a hero who descends into darkness and returns transformed. The reason every mythology has a figure of chaos and a figure of order. Not because they copied each other, because the riverbed was already there. There is a turn in Jung's work that most popular accounts leave out, and it may be the most important part of everything he ever wrote. Jung did not simply describe the collective unconscious as a fascinating feature of the human mind. He issued a warning about it. When individuals fail to confront the contents of the collective unconscious within themselves, when they refuse to look at their own shadow, their own capacity for cruelty, their own participation in patterns larger than themselves, those contents do not simply disappear. They erupt, and they erupt collectively. Jung was writing about this in the 1930s. He watched an entire continent become possessed by an archetype it refused to recognize. The shadow, the dark twin of consciousness, everything a society refuses to acknowledge about itself, was projected outward onto entire groups of people. And because no one had done the inner work of recognizing that darkness as their own, it consumed them from the outside. He called these events mass psychic epidemics, and he did not believe they were confined to the past. You have seen this. Maybe not on the scale of a world war, but you have seen it in the way an entire group of people can suddenly become possessed by a single idea, a single enemy, a single narrative that explains everything. You have felt the pull yourself, the intoxicating certainty of knowing who the villain is, the relief of having somewhere to put your anger. That pull is not rational. It is archetypal. The shadow is looking for a place to land. And if you have not given it a place inside yourself, if you have not sat with your own capacity for the very thing you despise, then you will project it onto a political party, onto a nation, onto a stranger on the internet, onto someone in your own family. Jung's point was not that you should excuse the behavior of others. His point was far more uncomfortable than that. His point was that the darkness you see out there is a mirror, and until you are willing to recognize what it reflects, you are not seeing clearly. You are dreaming, and the dream is using you. This brings us to the concept Jung placed at the center of his entire life's work: individuation. Individuation is the process of making the unconscious conscious, of integrating what has been hidden, denied, projected. It is not self-improvement. It is not about becoming a better version of yourself for your Instagram bio. It is, in Jung's view, an ethical act, perhaps the ethical act. Because when you withdraw your projections, when you stop making the world carry what belongs to you, something shifts, not just inside you, around you. The collective unconscious is, after all, collective. When one person does this work honestly, the shared dream becomes slightly more conscious, slightly more awake. You cannot illuminate the entire dark. That is not the task. The task is to carry your own small light through your own portion of it. To refuse to sleepwalk when every force around you is rewarding unconsciousness. That is what individuation means, not perfection, responsibility. So let us bring this back to you, to the room you are sitting in right now. You have dreams you do not understand. You have emotional reactions that seem to come from nowhere. Grief for strangers, fury at perceived injustices, inexplicable longing for a place you have never been. You have found yourself swept up in collective moods, shared outrage, shared euphoria, shared despair, and wondered afterward whether any of it was truly yours. Jung would tell you, not all of it was. Some of what you feel, some of what you believe, some of what you are most certain about does not originate in your personal history. It rises from a depth you did not create and cannot fully see. A depth you share with every person who has ever lived and every person who ever will. And this is not a reason for despair. It is a reason for awe and for seriousness. Because if this is true, if there really is a shared psychic inheritance shaping your perceptions, your fears, your loves, then the work of knowing yourself is not a luxury. It is not a phase. It is the most consequential thing you will ever do, not because it fixes you, but because every fragment of yourself you make conscious is one less fragment that the collective dark can use without your knowledge. If the collective unconscious is real, if there is a layer of the psyche that belongs to no one and to everyone, then what happens to the idea that your thoughts are entirely your own? How many of the beliefs you would die for were actually yours, and how many were the dream, thinking through you? If this gave you something to sit with, consider subscribing. There is more to explore, and some of it has been waiting for you longer than you know.